Managing Committee members of Anantapur branch, Kadapa branch, and Kurnool branch, speakers of today's evening technical session, a fine members and other colleagues, a fine evening to all of you. Mr. Kusuma Yatish is a practicing chartered accountant and also founder partner of Messrs. Shekhar and Yatish since 2000. He is the head of direct taxes and corporate law practice of the firm and also handles audits, structuring, tax consulting, and representation before various income tax authorities, including the Income Tax Appellate Tribunal. He has completed graduation in commerce and later took up chartered accountancy course and has qualified CA. He had done his articleship in Messrs. Daglia and Company. He is also a law graduate. He has been a member of the Committee on International Taxation of SIRC of ICAI. He is an active member of Group Dynamics, a study circle on international taxation. He has presented presented papers at various branches of ICAI. He has also at the Direct Taxes Regional Training Institute, Bangalore, has given training for the divisional officers of the Income Tax Department. With this small brief profile of the sir, I thanks everyone for giving me this opportunity. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Mukesh. Sir, Mr. Yatish, sir, the session is yours, sir. Please.
Thank you so much, sir. Just confirm to me that I am audible to you all.
Yeah, you are audible, sir.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much. Thanks for the introduction, Mukesh, and thanks SVG Gupta, sir, Chairman Anantapur branch, for this opportunity. For the opportunity to share some of my thoughts on these few important provisions of TDS that Gupta sir has assigned to me, and I'll make a very humble attempt to take you all through my learnings on the topic as well. One basic thing I would want to set it up with my listeners today. Since the topic is being handled by me and Kota sir for the day, let us take all the questions, if there be any, at the end of both the presentations, that is fine with you all. Furthermore, if at all questions can be posed on the chat box, we will try to address that as well. Friends, about the session itself, TDS is a topic and is a subject matter of huge litigation. Amendments, frequent clarifications, FAQs, circulars on a regular basis. These are all proof enough to say the challenges one faces in the course of our practice in concluding the applicability or otherwise of a provision. Whether a particular transaction should be subject to TDS or not. If yes, under which section? If under a particular section, which category of payment would it qualify? The issues continue.
Excuse me, sir, some disturbance, sir, audio. You was try to correct, sir.
No?
Now it's okay, sir.
Yes. And it does not end at that. These are all things that are within my control. What is the transaction? What is the invoice? What is the agreement I have entered into? But it does not stop there. Whether the directee has a PAN or not, whether the directee has filed his returns or not, what is the quantum of his TDS and TCS is also something, the responsibility of which is imposed on us as directees. This is not it. In case of few transactions, even professionals have varied views. And hence, litigation is something that is justified. Like any other law, TDS is also an evolving law. With the change in businesses, with the change in structure of carrying on business, with globalization of our markets, there being no boundaries. So a lot of new transaction comes in, and consequently, it is only good that the TDS aspects of the provisions are also evolving along with it. So all I would say is to let us evolve together in this learning, because I would not have encountered all possible practical situations. So whatever I have understood, appreciated out of my learnings is what I will share. So let us evolve together with your queries and also what we would like to add value to you all. And these provisions of TDS gains more importance because of the fact that the collection, the direct tax collection, portion of the direct tax collection, more than 60% is from out of TDS only. Consequently, it is very important for the government to ensure that the TDS provisions are very strict and enabled. At the same time, it is also important for us for the various reasons that Kotha sir would have already spoken to you. That is with regard to interest, penalty, disallowance of expenditure, and more so, it may take us till the of prosecution as well. So consequently, TDS is something important both for the collector, that is the government, as well as detectives are practicing professionals to understand the provisions. One thing we can see here is the convenience of the ministry. The ease of collection of taxes has always been the guiding force. Any provision that has been brought in, any procedure that has been introduced, any rule that is made, if you see, it is all towards enabling an easy collection of taxes. So that is their objective. We can't do anything about it. Let us see how best we can skill ourselves, add value to ourselves to see how we can face all those challenges that is imposed on us. Let us for a moment, few slides of mine in the initial stages may look like a repetition, but we would, even at the cost of, want to take it up because those are which are kind of similar and applicable to the sections that I'm going to handle today. And those are something that I thought may add value to our practice as well. These are the provisions that I would broadly cover, sir. 194A to 194M. We have identified sections which we thought may be important and used in our day-to-day basis. And also, all these sections are something that we have been on a regular basis in our practice looked at. So I would only look forward for more questions so that I will see and see how I can kind of provide a solution to it or learn from out of it. What is broadly the TDS provision? Obtaining the tax deduction account collection, tax deduction and collection account number, deduct tax on payment of income, remit wide challans, and file ETDS returns, issue TDS certificates. This is in a nutshell, what the whole of the TDS provision is. It is not, if it were so simple, we would all have been very happy. And the other way of looking at it, nobody would have come to us for advice as well, isn't it? What is it we have to be careful before we get into deduction of tax resource? What is it that we have to be careful about? Who shall deduct tax resource? We need to understand whether it is a resident, non-resident, who should be deducting the tax resource, whether it is an individual HUF or other than individual and HUF, whether an individual HUF who is subjected to tax audit or not. These are basic questions that we need to have before we even look at the application of TDS provisions. On whom to deduct is the next question that we should have. Who is the person? Few cases, payment is restricted only when the payment is made to an individual or HUF, few cases only to companies, few cases it's only to non-residents. We have to be careful about it. On what to deduct? What is the quantum on which we need to deduct? Is there a basic threshold that has been prescribed on the amount that has to be deducted? What are the amounts that characterize amount on which tax has to be deducted, whether GST has to be included or not, whether reimbursement has to be considered or not? What is the quantum on which tax needs to be deducted? And finally, when to deduct? When is it that I need to deduct the tax resource? Is it on payment, accrual basis, or credit basis, or on payment basis, whichever is earlier, or just on payment basis? So these are the basics that we need to be aware of. Now, section 197B is something that gave a relief during the COVID situation last year. However, none of my provisions will look at that reduced rate. I would be speaking to you, I will be sharing the rates as if no such relief has been provided to us. This is as it is in the provisions of the law. So 197B, which gave us relief for 2021, is something that I will not be showing you as rates that will not be covered here. These are a few sections I wanted you to understand in detail and make use of in adding to our professional opportunities also. One is section 197 and second is section 197A. 197 is where I make an application with the income tax authorities seeking them to instruct the deductor to deduct tax at a lower rate or nil rate. There are about 17 TDS provisions, and if the AO is satisfied that the total income of the recipient justifies a lower deduction or nil deduction, Upon making an application in form number 15, he will provide us with a relief, provide the assessees with a relief. So these are things that we can possibly impress upon our assessees, our clients, considering COVID situation and also considering the cash crunch we will all be into. Possibly this portion of the TDS is something, when it is in our bank accounts, will add more value to my business than being in the income tax department or the finance ministry's account. So these are few sections, 17 TDS provision, which possibly you can look into to ensure that if wherever it is possible, make an application with the income tax office. The next provision is about 197A. This is the cases where we can make a declaration to the deductee to say that my income is below the basic exemption limit, or I don't have taxable income, consequently, please don't deduct tax exemptions. Generally, we limit this only to the banks, only to the interest income that we earn from the banks. However, there are few other sections which possibly you can look at. I would call these are at least three common sections. One is section 194, income from dividend, no, that it is taxable. No, possibly an 15H or 15G can be given where your income is below the estimated total income is not taxable. Number two, where we can look at is 194A, where we have been accessing banks.
Sir, Yatish sir, sorry to disturb sir, still audio is not clear sir. Maybe please check your audio sir. Just switch off the audio and then we can switch on sir. Probably that may just give us a clear voice sir.
Let me say, I'll remove the headphones and speak to you.
Yep.
Am I audible clear now? Better than what I was?
Yes, yes sir, very much sir.
Okay. Section 194A does not limit itself only to the bankers. Any interest that is paid to even other individuals, other entities also gets covered here. Possibly cases where TDS is being deducted, 15H and 15G wherever it is applicable, 15H for regular assessees and 15G for senior citizens is something that you can make. Apart from this, the other section that I would, you may be keen on giving this declaration would be 194I with regard to rents. There also, I think these are three sections which we generally encounter in the course of our practice, and possibly we would not have asked our assessees, our clients to provide them this declaration. So this is something that we can help the clients with. 194 in respect of dividends, 194A with regard to interest other than interest on securities, and 194I. Only one thing that we have to be cautious about is where the total income is more than the income which is not chargeable to tax. Then possibly we are not allowed to issue this form 15H or 15G. However, there may be situations where in the initial quarter, I would have issued my 15H or 15G, whereas subsequently I find my income has exceeded the exemption limit. And there is a tax that I may have form that has been prescribed. Possibly we can write to the people to whom the declarations have been given, to the deductors to whom the declarations have been given, to say that 15H or 15G is hereby withdrawn. And consequently, they can start deducting tax at source. However, even the deductors have been imposed they have also been imposed a condition that where the payment that they make itself is in excess of the basic exemption limit, they are not supposed to consider my 15H or 15G. If the income that they themselves are providing is in excess of the basic exemption limit, they are supposed to ignore my 15H, 15G and start deducting tax at source. This is with regard to 197, 197A. Possibly these are areas where you need to look at for one more important reason, that is 194. 206 AB. That is a section which says where tax is deducted at source but no return has been filed, then the TDS will be made at a higher rate, double the rate. So even where I don't want to file my return of income, even if TDS is there, I don't want to file my return of income, I end up getting into double TDS. Or where my income is clubbed with that of my spouse, where my income is clubbed with that of my parents also, I would want to provide these forms and ensure that TDS credit is also not reflecting against my PAN. This is something that I will rush through. 206AA is where they say where the deductee does not have a PAN, you do TDS at 20% of the rate, or highest being 20%. However, there is this non-linking of Aadhaar. Upon this non-linking of Aadhaar, there is a possibility that the that my PAN will be considered as inoperative. Now that is something that has been postponed to 30th September. However, we still have to see as to how this word inoperative will be looked at. Whether when they say inoperative, is it that they would, is it that my PAN itself is no longer there? Or is it that just it has been kept in abeyance? As of now, it is not there. Because the earlier provision said, before it was amended to say that it will be called as inoperative, what they had told was the PAN itself does not exist. It will be deemed as if the PAN does not exist. Now they have changed it to inoperative. So in my personal opinion, even if it is inoperative, I can consider that the PAN is available, but it's only not linked to other. 206 AA should not apply. But it is something that we will have to see for clarity. 206 AB is where my, though I have a PAN, or even if I don't have a PAN, I have not been filing my return of income, and my TDS and TCS credit is more than 50,000. In such cases, the tax deduction will be double the rate that has been prescribed in the various provisions of law, or 5% where the rate is prescribed is lesser than 5%. So filing of income tax return, I think it's already covered by Professor, so I would not take too much time on it. So this is a small table that I have given as to what all returns have to be collected. Now, one point I wanted to make here was, there is a portal that has been enabled by the income tax department. Consequent to the portal, I can get in, I will register myself with my PAN. I will fill in the details of the PAN numbers of the assessees against whom I intend to deduct tax at source. And then it will provide me with a certificate kind of a thing which says whether the assessee is a specified assessee or not. Now, based on that, I will decide whether I have to deduct double the rate or whatever has been prescribed in this provision. Now, having said that, is it mandatory upon us, or is it required from my side to also collect the income tax returns from the assessees, from my payees? Should I also insist on the income tax returns? I am having that certificate. Should I also insist on the income tax returns as well as the 26 years to check whether the TDS plus TCS is more than 50,000? There is no bar, but however, the deductees would always say, since there is a portal, why don't you cross-check with it? But I would still insist that a declaration, if not for the IT declaration, at least is taken from the deductees to say that they have been regular in filing of their IT returns. Now, one more thing that they speak of in the circular that has been given as a clarification to 206 AB is that this particular exercise of checking whether an assessee is specified or otherwise has to be taken up only once in a financial year. That is in the month of April. I check the PAN number of one of my deductees and I keep a certificate with me. That should be good enough is what the circular says. Now, once the circular has been issued, that is binding on the department. And it has persuasive value when we also speak to the department if there is a litigation research. However, to be on a safer side, to be more conservative, I would suggest, in my opinion, after September being the due date for filing of our regular returns, or October or November as the case may be, for those assessees, whichever assessees the due date is September, October or November as the case may be, I would suggest one more declaration can be downloaded from the portal, because that is when the return filing requirement due date expires for the year ended 31st March 2021. When you look at the law, they say the 2 years for which the due date for filing of return has expired. What if a person has not filed his returns for 31st March 2020? In the month of September, he files his return for 31st March 2021. Consequent to his having filed the return, we may not have to do that penal deduction of double the taxes. Apart from that, we can also, by having the declaration, we can also be in par with the law, that is the act, than the circular, which prescribes that after the due date for filing of returns, you should have checked whether the returns filed is in respect of 31st March 2020 and 31st March 2021, not 19 and 20. Yes, the department has provided us the relief of only checking it once in a year, but in my personal opinion, and to be on a safer side, it is better that we also do this exercise once the due date for filing of returns expires. What are the other common points that I would want to bring here? One is with regard to GST. Applicability of TDS on GST. GST portion. Now for 194Q, they have already given a clarity whether on GST 194Q is applicable. They have clearly said that GST is not applicable. And as far as other services are concerned, our circular number 23 by 2017, that is 19th July 2017, clearly says that TDS on GST portion need not be considered. However, there is a small issue that is not an issue that has come up through the precedents, but consequent to few interactions with the income tax department in the course of my assessment proceedings. Few of the income tax officers have been taking this stand. Yes, on GST portion, you don't have to pay a tax source. However, I will give you an illustration also. Let us say the audit fees is about 28,000. 28,000 plus GST is in excess of 30,000, right? Now, whether TDS provisions is applicable if this is the one and only transaction that I have. Ideally, I would say, since the amount excluding GST is 28,000, I don't have to do TDS. But the department has a different take on this. They say, yes, we have told you not to deduct tax on the TDS portion, on the GST portion. However, for considering or for checking whether you have crossed the threshold limit. What is the threshold limit for 194J? 30,000. For checking whether you have crossed the threshold limit, I would want you to consider the GST portion also. You don't deduct tax at source on professional fees plus GST. You deduct only 2,800 in our illustration of 28,000. However, for checking the threshold, you please include the GST portion also. This is the stand that is being taken by few income tax officers. It has to be immediately complied with us, but considering that TDS is a provision where being more conservative is kind of keeps us happy, I would want to suggest that just in case we have those borderline cases, it's better that we do the TDS and be on the safer side of law than be on the litigated side of law. So I just wanted to mention that particular point with you. There are certain payments to government, RBI, mutual funds that are specified, corporations under the Central Act that have been exempted, where the payment is being made to such people, we don't have to deduct tax source as per section 186. This is another provision we have to be careful about, friends. Clubbing of income. Many a times, the beneficial owner is somebody different from the person who is the recipient of income. For various reasons, either to avoid 94A or for a proper planning of our family's properties, we would have included our spouse's name also in the property details, in the purchase of property. Consequent to which, when I receive rent, for investments made in the banks, deposits made in the bank, which I would have made in the name of my wife, the clubbing of income provision is what will attract that. In such cases, what happens? The deductor predominantly will look at and deduct tax at source in the name of the person to whom the payment is being made. Now the income tax portal, the filing income tax returns also facilitates me to transfer the TDS portion along with income of another person into my income tax returns. So for example, if my wife has some income from bank, there is a TDS against it. When I file my income tax return, I can always transfer this TDS credit that is lying in my wife's 26AS to my 26AS and file my return of income, which also requires me to file the return of income of my wife also for it to match it. So when this happens, there is an additional effort that we have to put to seek transfer. Yes, we can do it, but if we can provide a declaration to the deductor and tell them declaration that I can provide under Rule 37BA, declaration I can provide to the deductor and instruct him to deduct tax at source in my name, that credit will directly sit in my 26AS. I don't have to get into the issues of having to file the return of my wife as well. So wherever this clubbing of provision is there, ensure that you are giving a declaration, and there is no format for this declaration. All they want is name, address, PAN, payment or credit details, and the reason as to why you are seeking this transfer of seeking this credit to be given to a different PAN number. If this much is there in whatever format you want, you will have to provide this declaration to the deductor, and they need to consider this declaration and deduct in the name of the person whose PAN has been given to the deductor. And this also helps. See what happens in 206AB that we were studying. In 206AB, when they apply that, let us say my wife, I have transferred a lot of money to my wife in the form of gift, and she earns interest in huge amounts, and the TDS also is in excess of 50,000. Now, consequent to the clubbing provisions, that is the only income she has. She does not file her written off income. Consequently, what happens when her PAN number is checked by the banker, it is said that she is a specified assessee. Once she is a specified assessee, the deduction happens at a double the rate. Consequent to which there is a cash flow hinge. Rather than that, why not give a declaration and also ensure clubbing of income, ensure that the TDS also is reflected in my PAN, in the PAN of the person who actually is offering it to tax. This is another new thing that has come and knocked our doors. This amendment to residential status. A lot of things the government brings in to curb malpractice in taxes. When they bring in a new provision, there is some additional burden that the others have to go through. Now, what is this change? They have brought in 6(1)(a), section 6, within brackets 1 capital A. That is a new residential status. That is to say, an individual being a citizen of India having a total income other than income from foreign sources exceeding 15 lakh rupees during the previous year shall be deemed to be a resident of India. Now, a person who is a non-resident, ideally a non-resident, who has an income outside India, which is not chargeable to tax there, however, has an income in excess of 15 lakhs in India, will be deemed to be a resident of this country. Now, consequently, whenever a payment is being made to such non-residents who are individuals again, only when a payment is being made to such non-residents, we will have to shift ourselves from 195 to the regular resident TDS sections. So even when I am making a payment overseas, I may, because of this particular provision, end up not looking at 195, but looking at the resident TDS provisions. So apart from also seeking whether they have a PAN, whether they are a non-resident, we also have to know from them whether they are liable to tax in the country of their residence right now. If they are liable to tax there, then they continue to be non-residents. If they are not liable to tax, the next question is, are you earning more than 15 lakhs in India? All these are something that I as a deductor, I am supposed to check and then apply the TDS provisions. So look at what all burdens come around a simple provision to curb people not paying tax in respect of their global income. The next point is with regard to payments in kind, which I will take in brief, and then we will get into our provisions for the day. This is one area that has always been coming forth and going back to say whether payments made in kind should also go through the rigors of deduction of tax at source. See, all along it was barter system, and it evolved to payment through money, currency, because barter system had its own negatives. In fact, if you see Lagan, that movie, I think it kind of give a broad idea to say, even there, the taxes were collected in the form of produce only. Taxes were collected in kind. However, now that it is only happening in currency, but still they say old habits die hard. Still there are transactions, still there are structures where the payments are made in kind. One such situation happened, which had to be brought to the ITA Chandigarh. That is in the case of Punjab State Warehousing Corporation. Brief about what the whole issue was. This is because in every provision, friends, they say payments made otherwise as well. They don't use the word kind, payments made otherwise also. Now, whether this payments made otherwise includes payments made in kind is what is the trigger point for me to emphasize so much on payments in kind. This is a situation where the assessee used to give out paddy to the miller. The paddy had to be bet, and there was a particular percentage that they had already finalized. So if I give you 1 kg, 67% of it you will have to give me. Anything that is left out, you can hold it with you. The husk also, you can use it for yourself. Per ton, I will pay you, per quintal, I will pay you 15 rupees. This was the arrangement. Now the department saw this and said, yes, to the extent of 15 rupees is fine, but what you are giving up as husk, what you are giving up as other byproducts from out of this beating there in the mill is something that you have paid as consideration in kind, not in the form of money. Otherwise, you would not have agreed for this 15 rupees. It would have been much higher. Just because you are getting these byproducts in the form of husk and other products, which you can monetize, you are reducing your price by 15 rupees. Otherwise, you would have had a higher price. Consequently, there is a consideration in the whole of the transaction on which you have not deducted tax at source. Both is in kind.
Sorry to disturb, sir. Sir, voice is not, let's say, repeated messages are coming from the audience, sir. ఒకసారి ఏమన్నా లాగౌట్ అయ్యి లాగిన్ అవుతారా సార్? సమ్ ప్రాబ్లం అనుకుంటుంది సార్. Sorry.
Everybody have the same issue?
Yeah, there were some 4 to 5 messages are there in chat box.
Okay. Shall I log out and log in, sir?
Please, sir. Please, sir.
Yeah, sure.
సార్ అందరికీ ఆడియో ప్రాబ్లం ఉంది కదా సార్? సార్ అందరికీ ఆడియో ప్రాబ్లం ఉంది కదా సార్?
వెంకట సార్ మీ వాయిస్ క్లియర్ లేదు. హలో
హలో సార్. హలో
మీ వాయిస్
నాకు పర్వాలేదు సార్, చెప్పండి.
మీ వాయిస్ బాగా వినపడుతుంది సార్. సార్ దగ్గర ఏదో టెక్నికల్ ప్రాబ్లం ఉంది
బాగా వినిపిస్తా ఉందా? సరే సరే, ఓకే ఓకే, చూస్తాం. ఇప్పుడు ఇది చేయండి, ఇంకొకసారి రీ ఎంటర్ కానీ చూస్తుంటా.
రైట్ సార్, డన్.
లాగిన్ అయితే సరిపోతుంది, చూస్తుంటా. నాది వాయిస్ క్లియర్ గా ఉందా?
చాలా క్లియర్ గా ఉంది సార్.
సరే సరే, వాళ్ళు
Sir, am I audible now?
Yeah.
Better now? Okay.
ಯತೀಶ್, ಇದು ಸೆಕ್ಷನ್ಸ್ ಹೋಗ್ಬಿಡಿ. 6 ಗಂಟೆ ಆಗೋಯ್ತು ಆಲ್ರೆಡಿ. 200 KB ಎಲ್ಲ ನಾನು ಮಾಡ್ತೀನಿ. ಆಮೇಲೆ ಬೆಟರ್ ಯು ಕ್ಯಾನ್ ಡೈರೆಕ್ಟ್ಲಿ ಸೆಕ್ಷನ್ಸ್ ಇಫ್ ಯು ಕ್ಯಾನ್ ಟೇಕ್ ಇಟ್ ವಿಲ್ ಬಿ ಬೆಟರ್.
No, this payments in kind was something that I wanted to emphasize on.
Okay. I think audio is clear now.
It's clear now, sir. Bangalore, Kotha sir is telling it is clear. I would want to know from Anantapur.
Yeah, it is clear, sir. Now its voice is clear now, a bit better than before.
Some technical issue probably. Now, with regard to this payment in kind, now the department took that stand. Now the IT-AT did not give a clear clarity there. What it said was, yes, in this regard, tax has to be deducted at source. However, since the produce was not even taken back, in the sense whatever husk and byproduct that were coming in, what did not even go back to the person who had given it to the hull, he can't even determine the value. So TDS will not apply on that. They said that TDS is applicable, but just because the produce did not go back to the person, he did not even become a owner, consequently TDS is not applicable. So 2 things that they deciphered there. They said, first you will have to determine the consideration. If the consideration is being paid in kind, then TDS is applicable. However, if the consideration itself is in kind, TDS is not applicable. But again, this is something that you can't take off the cuff and say, so let us start structuring the transactions in kind, wherein the consideration is paid in kind, and ensure that we don't even have to pay the TDS, because we have the Supreme Court decision itself Supreme Court decision itself, because like I mentioned to you, in most of the sections, the words used are by any other mode. Okay, consequent to which this gains importance. Kanchenjunga Seafoods case. In that particular case, the payment had to be made in the form of fish that was being fished from out of the Indian waters. And 85% of the fish that was fished from the Indian waters had to be paid in the form of charges for hiring the ship. Supreme Court held that value the fish that has been given and consequently deduct tax at source. So, and the words in 195 and in most of our other sections are not very different. Consequently, even payments that are made in kind, that is by any other mode, possibly will also get covered within the rigors of the provisions of TDS, is what I would want to, before we get into the actual provisions that we discuss today. However, this also comes with a word of caution to say, as far as TDS is concerned, no tax planning is something that we would want to suggest. Conservative approach is the best approach, because the cost of risks of being caught unawares, of being non-compliant, is far larger than the cost of compliance. Consequently, it's better that we have a conservative approach for any of the provisions. In the course of our discussion, there may be few things that may trigger a tax planning thought, but I would still want to ask you to consider that with a bit of pinch of salt. In the first section that I would want to take you all through is section 194A, interest other than interest on securities. Where a bank pays, it is 5,000 rupees. Where it is paid by any person, it is 5,000 rupees. However, if it is by a banking company, the payment has to be in excess of 40,000 rupees for any assessee, or 50,000 rupees in case of a senior citizen. When is it required to be deducted? At the time of payment or credit, whichever is earlier. What is the rate of tax deduction at source? 10%. I have also given you two rates here, 206AA and 206AB. What if he does not have a PAN? What if he does not have, what if he has not filed the returns? However, here when I gave the rate for not having filed the returns, I have considered that he has a PAN. Otherwise, the rates will be completely different. Please take note of it. And whether this particular nature of tax deduction at source is eligible for relief under section 197 and 197A. So this is in just what 194A is all about. However, with regard to cooperative societies, there they have given a relief to say only where the cooperative society has a turnover of more than 50 crores in the previous year, only in those cases they will have to do TDS. Otherwise, provisions of TDS under section 194A is not applicable to them. Let us get into few small issues when it comes to 194A. Deposit in joint names in the banks, in whose name does the TDS have to be made? Whether TDS has to be made in both the names, or how is declaration has not been given by the depositors. Where no declaration has been given by the depositors, the bankers are instructed to deduct tax in the hands of the person whose total interest, that is the interest from the deposits held in joint name and held in his personal name, aggregate together, whosoever has the highest interest is the name against which tax will be deducted at source. Payment of interest to a partner. Payment of interest to a partner is excluded under section 194A clause 3(4). Any interest that is paid to a partner does not go through the rigors of 194A. However, where the partner happens to be a non-resident, then 194A exemption will no longer apply. Then the tax needs to be deducted under section 195. We have to be careful about the residential status of the partner. Interest paid by a bank where it is core banking. When should they deduct tax at source? Generally, what happens in case of a core banking, every day the credit will go and sit into the account of the person. Though it will not reflect in the accounts, it will go sit in the account of the person, against the account of the person. Now, there is an issue whether tax has to be deducted on a daily basis. So a circular has been issued in this is in 3/2010 to say, in case of banking, TDS needs to be made with regard to the interest paid by a bank once in a year. Once at the end of the year, or if the bankers themselves have imposed a shorter period of time during such shorter period, or the day on which the deposit account is liquidated. Earliest of any of these three is when the tax has to be deducted at source by the bank in respect of the interest paid by them. So there won't be any default with regard to the delayed deduction, even when the deduction is made on 31st of March, where the IC holds the deposit for the whole of the year. Circular number 715 is what I intend to bring to your notice to say, this is a circular issued in 1995, which has FAQs. So many of our queries are something that would have been addressed there. I just wanted to bring it to your notice here. The next point is with regard to interest on delayed payments to MSMEs are consequent to violation of contract with our purchases. I make purchases, I don't make the payment within the credit period. I am asked to, consequent to the contract, I am asked to pay an additional interest. If not consequent to a contract, MSMEs, if I have not paid that within 45 days or 15 days, as the case may be, then I am supposed to pay an additional interest. When I pay this additional interest, whether I have to do TDS under section 194A. Here, friends, I would draw your attention to two decisions of the Bombay High Court, one Bombay High Court and another the Bombay Tribunal, where it has been held that the interest partakes the character of the main transaction. In the sense, where a purchase is made, the interest that is paid consequent to the delay in payment towards my debtors also partakes the character of purchases. The case, if you want to note down, is CIT versus Vidyut Corporation 324 ITR 221, where it was held that the payment of interest on account of delay in payment of the sale price of the goods supplied by the undertaking partakes the same character as the sale consideration. This is something that I repeatedly using in few other sections also. This Vidyut Corporation is something that will repeat. So interest paid on delayed payments partakes the character of the payment. Why is it so? Another Mumbai bench, Mumbai Tribunal has decided, has discussed this in Central Bank of India versus JCIT 284 ITR 240 Mumbai, where they had an occasion to discuss whether delay in remittance of credit card payment, interest on delay in remittance of credit card payment, whether 194A would had to be made by the payer. The relationship between the person who had to remit the money towards his credit card dues is not that of a, there is no debt that got created from out of the transaction. Consequently, the interest that was paid does not partake the character of interest, but it is just a charges that has been paid for delayed settlement of credit card dues. So there are two cases that will help you in deciding whether when interest is being paid, consequent to delay in payment to my debtors, whether tax has to be deducted under 194A. In my opinion, and based on this case class, we can conclude that 194A is something that does not apply because it partakes the character of the main transaction itself. This is about 194A, friends. Next, we get into 194C. This is in respect of contract payments, which we encounter on a regular basis, on a day-to-day basis. Who has to deduct tax at source? Any person responsible for paying any sum to any resident has to deduct tax at source, where the single payment or credit is in excess of 30,000, or the aggregate payment or credit is in excess of 1 lakh. When are they required to deduct? Payment or credit, whichever is earlier. Now, all payments covered by 194C, if it is made to an individual or HUF, then it is 1%. Other than an individual or HUF, it is 2%. If it is to a transport contractor who is plying, leasing, hiring goods carriages and owns less than 10 vehicles, and he provides us a declaration to that effect, then the tax needs to be deducted at zero. No tax needs to be deducted at source. Again, 206AA, 20%, 206AB takes us to 5% because the rate is 1 or 2%, even double the rate only take us to 4%. So 5% will be the higher rate, 206AB, 5% will be reduced. Now, what are the amounts that qualify for being considered for deduction at source under 194C? Any payment made for a contract for carrying on work. Work is something that we will discuss in detail a little later. Or for supply of labor for carrying out such work. Or in the course of plying, hiring or leasing goods carriages by owning more than 10 goods carriages. If the payment is towards such contract, then tax needs to be deducted at source. Now let us get into the definition of work, which will be the trigger for us to see which are all the payments, which are all the transactions which needs to be considered for deduction of tax under 194C. Advertising, any payments towards advertising, any payments towards broadcasting, telecasting, or payments towards production of programs for such broadcasting or telecasting, carriage of goods or passengers by any mode other than railways, payments towards catering, and the main thing is manufacturing or supply of customized product by using the material supplied by such customer or his or its associate. This is very important for us to decipher and see what are the transactions that would get covered. Before getting into what is it that will bring us to TDS, we will look at when is TDS not applicable. When is it not applicable? One is when the transporter has 10 vehicles and he provides me a declaration. What is the declaration that he has to give me? In form number 26Q, he has to give a declaration that he has less than 10 vehicles and he also provides us with a PAN. Or payment or single invoice is not in excess of 30,000. Aggregate of all the payments made by me is not in excess of 1 lakh. Then also tax deduction at source under 194C does not trigger. Or where the payment or credit is consequent to a personal work of mine. It is attributable to a personal use of the contractor. Then also tax deduction at source will not. Now, as far as the services are concerned, transportation, advertising, we are all clear with all of these. The most tricky one is with regard to the manufacturing and supply of customized products. Let us look at how this provision deals. When is it called a work? When the manufacturing or supply of product according to the specification of the purchaser. When I purchase goods, does it even come under 194C? Will it even come under TDS provisions? Now that 194Q has come, it has come. Otherwise, for purchases, there was never TDS. So consequently, any purchase simpliciter should not have come within the rigors of deduction of tax at source at all. However, where manufacturing or supply or product of goods according to my specification, customization. However, the material that has been used in the manufacture of this product is out of the material that has been purchased from me. I am the person, I am the contractor. I have given this order for purchase of material. For manufacture of that material, I have supplied material to them to manufacture such material. Who has supplied such material? Either me or a person who happens to be my associate. Who is an associate? An associate or a relative as is defined in 40A 2B. Now, all along, it was only the customer who was considered here. All along, it was only if the customer had supplied material is when the TDS provisions used to trigger. However, to overcome the provisions of TDS, customers started using their associate enterprises. The associate enterprises used to supply goods to the manufacturer and he used to supply goods to me, consequent to which all our purchase transaction 194C was never getting triggered. Somewhere the income tax department or the finance ministry sniffed this and they wanted to curb this. So consequently, they included, apart from the customer, even if his associate or a relative who is defined under 48(2)(b supplies material for the manufacture or supply of goods to me, that also will be exigible under the provisions of section 194C. So this is an amendment that has been brought into 194C with regard to the definition of work, also include the associates, supplies made by the associates as well. Now comes the issues. Now, when should I deduct tax at source? When is it work? Work is when material has been supplied by the customer. Now, first the manufacturer has to be according to. Number two, I should have supplied the material or my associate should have supplied the material. Consequent to which it will come under 194C. Once it comes under 194C, what is the quantum on which I need to deduct tax at source? If in the invoice that has been raised on me, if I am the purchaser, if the invoice that has been raised on me, if the value of goods supplied by me is also mentioned, on that portion, I don't have to deduct tax at source. And the balance portion is deemed to be service that I have received, on that I have to apply 194C. However, where this value of goods supplied by me or by my associate enterprise is not mentioned in the invoice, on the whole of the value, tax has to be deducted at source. Hope I am clear here. Where The value of the goods has been mentioned. That value of goods need not be considered for a deduction of tax at source. Where it has not been mentioned, the whole of the value has to be considered. Now, what are the issues that we encounter when it comes to this particular definition, where they have included even the associates, or even where the customer himself is, contractor himself has supplied goods? How do I know that what goods I have supplied are the goods that have been used in the product that has been manufactured to sell to me? Is it that it has to be part of the contract to say, see, you have to manufacture these goods out of the goods supplied to me? Only if it is there, it is easy for me to assure myself, yes, this is a transaction that comes under 194C. So the contract should specify that. Number 2, should there be no sales to such manufacturer by the specified person of any goods, directly or indirectly? What if what I am purchasing, I have not instructed him that he has to use the goods that I have supplied to him, but nevertheless I have supplied goods to him. Now, having supplied goods to him, will I come under 194C? I have not given any instructions to say, you don't have to use this material in the manufacture of goods that you are going to supply to me. Will still 194C trigger? What is the quantum of raw material that he has to use? Even if 1% of the goods is used, will 194C trigger? What if I have supplied machinery? What if I have supplied machinery spare parts? Luckily for us, machinery, if I have supplied through which the manufacture happens, I don't have to worry. Even if I have supplied spare parts for the machinery, then also I don't have to worry. My worry is only when I have supplied products. Now the tricky part is, what all do we check before we come to the conclusion? One is for the deductor to see whether 194C, whether the products have been supplied. Now let us take our situation as auditors. When we go there, what all do we have to see? Apart from checking who are all the 48 2B persons, we also have to collect the documents or details from this 48 2B associate enterprises. Check if those people, they have to expose their books to us, or they have to give us a ledger extract, or they have to give us a declaration that they have sold or not sold the goods to the suppliers who have supplied goods to us, customized goods to us. Tricky, but nevertheless, we have to encounter this provision on a regular basis. So this is something that we have to look at, both when we are suggesting the customer, suggesting our clients how they have to structure their transaction, and also in the course of our audit to check whether tax deduction provision have been complied with appropriately. Now let us look at few issues that I have looked at here. One is with regard to the printed material, where I have asked for printing of material and they have provided me with the printed material. It can be my letterheads, it can be my visiting cards. Should I deduct tax at source on such printed material? Because when you look at the definition of work, only if I have provided, only if I have supplied material to them to print and send it to me, that is when 194C should trigger. Otherwise, it should not trigger. If I have not supplied any material to the contractee, that is the person who is printing this for me, ideally there should not be deduction of tax at source. And rightly so, it has been held in various decisions, including Karnataka High Court decision, to say where I have not sold the material, where I have not sold the material, or I have not given the material for being printed, it is more of a contract of supply than a contract of service. Consequently, supply of a printed material need not be considered for deduction of tax at source under 194C. What happens with regard to daily wage laborers versus payment to labor contractor? Most of the construction contracts, it is either I recruit laborers on a daily basis, or I assign the role to a labor contractor, and it is his responsibility to ensure that he is bringing in the labor and getting my construction contractor. Now, in daily wage laborers, I may make the payment directly to the laborers. Vis-a-vis, when I make a payment to a labor contractor, I make the lump sum payment to the labor contractor for him to make the payments to his laborers. When it comes to daily wage laborers, it is more of an employer-employee relationship as against a labor contractor, where there is a contract relationship. So daily wage laborers, when a payment is made, is not exigible to 194C. Only when the payment is made to a labor contractor for the services he is providing to us in the form of sending his labor, that is when 194C triggers. Transportation charges, Regularly, what happens in case of a sale invoices, they will also add some freight. Freight charges also will be included in the invoice. Like I said, with regard to interest, this also kind of appropriates the characteristic of the larger transaction, that is the purchase transaction. And for these transportation charges, even if it has been separately mentioned in the invoice, since it appropriates the character of the main purchase, so transportation charges also becomes purchase, and consequently 194C would not apply there, as is held in Gujarat High Court also in Krishik Bharati. Common purchase orders. This is where we will have a challenge. What is this common purchase orders? The same purchase order will also have a contract for installation. My purchase order will also have a contract for some civil work also. If there is a common purchase order, including installation and civil work, what is the predominant objective of the whole contract is something that has to be looked into. If purchase of a machinery is the predominant part of the character, then you don't have to consider deduction of tax source on the contract for installation or the contract for any civil work that is already part of my purchase contract. However, there will be certain situations where I have split contract, one for purchase of goods, another for installation. Those cases, in respect of the installation, it is ideal that we deduct tax at source. However, there also the department has taken a view that even on the purchases you need to deduct tax at source, because installation and purchases is one contract and consequently there is a service. However, it is only on the installation portion that I need to deduct tax at source and not on the purchase cost. AMC 194C or 194J. This has been again a much debated provision. Again, we will also be looking at this under 194J. Here, one basic thing I would want to tell you for you all to appreciate and apply it in the course of your deduction of tax at sources. If the maintenance contract is a regular maintenance contract, though I also not aware as to what a regular maintenance contract is, what a special maintenance contract is. If it is a regular maintenance contract for day-to-day upkeep of the machinery, then it is 194C. However, if such maintenance contract requires technical personnel, technical skill and knowledge associated with it, then it is under 194J. But this is not very clear as you read the provision. This has been something that we have assimilated from out of the precedents that we have in various cases. Consequently, if it is something like some technical knowledge, technical skill, technical personnel that are required for this AMC, then it goes under 194J or 194C otherwise. What happens with regard to hoardings? There are two things that can happen with regard to hoardings. One is I want to advertise my firm, advertise a company that I have, advertisement I need to make. I approach an advertiser and he provides me with a hoarding. When he provides me with a hoarding, then what I need to deduct is, because what he's providing to me is services in the form of a contract, 194C. However, if I am approached by person to give my space to them, I have a terrace space, somebody comes, approaches me, takes the terrace space for fixing the hoarding, or I have a hoarding, I give the hoarding on rent, then what applies is 194I, not 194C. Where I take it for my advertisement, it is 194C. Where the hoarding itself is taken on rent, then it is 194I. Again, we will have this issue with regard to reimbursement of expenses that possibly we will discuss as and when we discuss 194J. Payment made to a security guard, it is again a contract for service and not contract for supply. Consequently, tax has to be deducted at source. One new thing that I saw when it came to 194C is freight on to-pay basis. Freight to-pay basis. Freight on to-pay basis, if it has been given, and I make a payment to that transporter, then tax deduction at source is applicable on such contract. One small illustration, this anyhow will be shared. I would only want your attention with regard to this payment that I mentioned of, payment of rupees 18,000 I make on 10th June 2021 and rupees 32,000 on 15th June 2021. On 10th June, I make a payment of 18,000. On 15th June, I make a payment of 32,000 towards building repairs. And I am a proprietor or HUF, my turnover is more than 1 crore and TDS I have to make. Now, what is the amount on which I need to deduct tax at source? If one or two of you can put it in the chat also, Let us see what kind of answers we would get here. Payment of rupees 18,000 on 10th of June 2021 and 32,000 on 15th of June 2021. Whether I need to club 32,000 plus 18,000 and do TDS on 50,000, or should I restrict myself to 32,000 alone, because that is the only amount that is exceeding 30,000. I would also draw your attention to 194C subsection 5, which says only if the aggregate is in excess of 1 lakh, I need to deduct tax at source on full of it. If it is more than 30,000, then only on such part of it I need to deduct tax at source. But considering conservatism principle, I would suggest you do TDS as we have been doing on the whole of the 50,000, not on 32. However, where we have already done a TDS and we have not considered this 50,000. Okay, I think possibly I will also have to add, not both are different. Okay, even if it is a different contract, but to the same person, payment is to the same person, even if it is different contract. Ideally, the TDS we will be making it on 50,000 only. However, if you read the provision 194C, we can restrict ourselves only to 32,000 and not deduct tax at source on 18,000. Provided the whole of the payments, cumulative payments, does not exceed 1 lakh rupees. Otherwise, I won't take any other provision because we have many more provisions to cover. So this anyhow will be shared with you friends. Next, we'll get into section 194H, commissioner brokerage. Here, any person other than an individual or HUF who is responsible for paying to a resident alone any income by way of commission, not being insurance commission, which is referred to in 194D, or brokerage, shall deduct tax at source either on the time of credit or payment, whichever is earlier, at the rate of 5%. At the rate of 5%, if the payment made is in excess of 15,000 rupees. Here again, an individual or HUF, it is applicable only if his turnover crosses 1 crore or 50 lakhs in case of a profession. Only then this provision will apply. Otherwise, they don't have to deduct tax at source. Now, even if it is for personal use, again, there is no need to deduct tax at source, even in case of 194H. 194H, the whole edifice stands on only one particular phrase, and that phrase is person acting on behalf of another person. Person acting on behalf of another person. Similar to 192. 192, what is the basic condition that is important there? What is the basic characteristic that is required there? Employer-employee relationship. Only if employer-employee relationship is there, then is when 192 shall apply. Similar to that, under 194H, there has to be a relationship of principal and agent. Only if there is a relationship of principal and agent, 194H itself is exigible. Otherwise, 194H should not apply at all. So there has to be a principal agency relationship should be there. A person acting on behalf of another person. And consequent to his having acted on behalf of another person, he is getting a consideration. Such consideration should be subjected to TDS under section 194H. I think the same provision of 206 AA will be there, but you can look at it. Cumulative credit payment less than 15K, then you don't have to deduct tax at source. Payment made to MTNL, BSNL, you don't have to deduct tax at source. Payment made to banks towards bank guarantee commission, cash management service charges, demat account maintenance, underwriting service charges, clearing charges, credit card and debit card commission, you don't have to deduct tax at source as per notification number 56 of 2012. So the edifices, there has to be a principal agent relationship for something to get categorized here. Let us look at few judicial precedents wherein we had this issue of something getting characterized not as commission or as commission. Stamp vendors, where the person was eligible for a small amount of commission for the stamps that he procured from the government and sold it to his customers. It was held that the relationship was principal to principal. He purchased the stamp paper, he sold it to the other person. It was a principal to principal relationship. The person was not acting on behalf of the government to sell the stamp papers. He was a stamp vendor. Consequently, the earnings made by him will not be exigible under 194H, and the government need not deduct tax at source under 194H. Similar is the case where franchises are taken for sale of currencies, starter packs, recharge coupons for mobiles, for your set-top boxes, all these payments that are made. Here also, it has been held that the transaction is on principal to principal basis and 194H should not trigger. However, there is one decision, concurrent decision given by the Hyderabad Tribunal in ACIT versus Idea Cellular Limited 2009, where it has held that it is in the nature of 194H. Otherwise, there are a catenary of decisions, one of Calcutta, one of Kerala, which says that payment made to a franchisee with regard to sale of all these currencies should not be under 194H. What happens with regard to this free goods, schemes, trade discounts, cash discounts that are being given to my either the distributors or to the traders for having achieved a particular turnover, for having procured a particular quantity of material? They are being given free goods. They are being given trade discounts. What happens to these trade discounts? Is it in the nature of commission? Because there is a threshold that I keep. When you reach this turnover, for having achieved this turnover, I will give you this incentive. For having purchased this many products, I will provide you this discount, trade discount. Whether this is also exigible to 194H. Here also it has been rightly held. None of these payments in the form of free goods, schemes, trade discounts are paid to an agent. It is paid to a person on a principal to principal basis. Consequently, 194H should not pay. Same is with these pharmaceutical products also, where a lot of such schemes are there. There also it is not applicable. Travel agents who have been given concessional rate for tickets and subsequently they sell it at a particular markup, there also it has been held that it is principal to principal and not principal to agent. Consequently, no TDS need to be made. However, there may be certain situations where the commission agent, see, I have to sell goods to somebody, I appoint a commission agent, the commission agent sells the goods, collects the payment and makes the differential payment to me after holding back his commission. When he does that, should the person, should the principal who has appointed this agent deduct tax at source? Because he never made the payment to the agent. The agent himself withheld the money and the balance alone he paid to the seller. Does he have to deduct tax at source? Circular 619 clearly says, even when the payment has been withheld by the commission agent by himself, even then tax needs to be deducted at source and then collected back. Whatever is the modus he intends to apply there, he can apply there, but he needs to collect the tax at source, deduct the tax at source rather. This with regard to 194H, then 194I with regard to rental payments, where the payment being made is in excess of 2,40,000. That is from 1/4/2019. Earlier it was 1,80,000. If the payment made is in excess of 2,40,000, either at the time of payment or credit, whichever is earlier, I deduct tax at source. I am required to deduct tax at source at the rate of 10%. If it is land, building, land appurtenant thereto, factory building or furniture and fittings, or 2% if it is for use of machinery, plant and equipment. We have to be very careful about furniture and fittings. Furniture and fittings are considered where? In 10%, not under 2%. So machinery, plant and equipment alone qualify for 2%. Furniture and fittings qualify for 10%. So here again, the assessees are eligible to approach the income tax department for lower or nil deduction. They can also seek recourse under 197A and make an application under 15H or 15G to seek no deduction of tax at source. Here, there are few things that I intend to bring to your notice with regard to rent. Only point is where refundable security deposit and non-refundable rental advance have been given. When is it that the tax needs to be deducted at source? If it's refundable security deposit, then I don't have to deduct tax at source. If it is non-refundable deposit, then I need to deduct tax at source at the time of payment. I will also mention to you a circular number 5/2001, which gives you a detailed checklist as to when an advance rent is paid, how is TDS required to be appropriated by the deductee. If I am the person who has given the property on rent, for 5 years I have already collected the rent in advance. At the time of collection itself, the person has deducted tax at source. But how am I supposed to claim credit? That has been given in this circular. That is for the deductee. We will not discuss about it since we are concentrating only on the deductor. deductor has to deduct tax at source on what? On the whole of the amount that is being paid. If it is not refundable, it's supposed to be appropriated against the rents that I'm supposed to pay for the subsequent periods. Even if services has not been obtained, I'm supposed to deduct tax at source because it's on payment or credit basis, whichever is earlier. How is TDS required to be deducted if rent is not paid on a monthly basis? As and when the payment is made or as and when the credit is given. I may have an arrangement with my lessor that I will pay the rent only 3 quarterly ones, half yearly ones or yearly ones. Consequently, whenever the credit happens, whenever the payment happens, I can always deduct tax at source. With regard to cold storage facility, they say 194C will apply, though it is a payment being made for use of a particular space. They say 194C is applicable and not 194I. And there is this concern, or there is this issue with regard to payment to hotels for the rooms. The simple point that we need to look at is where I approach a hotel, take a room, and that room is not designated for me for the whole of the year as such, then 194I does not trigger. However, if I have a contract with the hotel to say, so and so room has to be set aside for me for the whole of the year or for a particular period, and the payment for which exceeds 2,40,000, then I need to deduct tax at source under 194I. There's one thing that I also appreciated only when I was preparing for this presentation as such, friends. Generally what happens in case of an employer-employee, when I pay salary and I make a payment on behalf of the employee, let us say I make a payment for mediclaim insurance, employees mediclaim insurance, or I make a payment of some other payment which the employee is obligated to pay. What happens? It is supposed to have got added to the salary, isn't it? That is an obligation of the employee which I as an employer have taken care of. So consequently, it is an indirect payment I have made to the employee. Here, there is the circular number 718 dated 1995, which says, if consequent to the contract of rent, the obligation to make the payment of this corporation tax or municipal tax on the property is on the lessee. If the lessee has to pay the corporation tax, municipal tax, then it will not be considered as the rent of the lessor. I always thought it is the obligation of the lessor which has been paid by the lessee, consequently TDS provisions, and also considering this as part of my rent and then claiming deduction under 24 is what I thought. But there is a circular exclusively for that to say that no need to deduct tax at source under 194I if it is an obligation that has been created consequent to the agreement itself. That is it with regard to 194I that I intended to share. There are a few other issues, but I thought let us get into the other provisions because I have 14 more minutes. 194IA, this is a provision that has been introduced to tax transactions, to collect tax on transactions at 1% instead of transfer of certain immobile property. This is ideally a transaction not introduced to collect taxes in advance, but only to trace transactions. Consequently, this is not for the purpose of mechanism to collect taxes, but it is a mechanism to trace transactions to ensure that compliance is brought in with regard to filing of returns or collection of taxes. The tracing it used to help. Who has to deduct tax at source? The purchaser, who is responsible for paying to the resident transfer or a seller any consideration for purchase of an immobile property, the consideration of which is in excess of 50 lakhs, either at the time of payment or credit, whichever is earlier, deduct at 1%. When is it supposed to be deposited? Due date for remittance is 30 days from the end of the month in which the deduction is made, as against various other provisions where it has to be remitted within 7 days from the end of the month in which the deduction is made. Except for 190, only for 194A, this exception is there, where they allow 30 days from the end of the month in which the deduction is made. Practically, we'll be deducting before the registration happens. But however, this is the timeline that is provided. And the remitter need not obtain tax deduction account or collection account number. Consequently, it is with the PAN that he has to make this remittance. Now here few issues which considering that this section has already gone through so many years of our scrutiny. We already know a lot of answers. Few issues that can come up is where there are joint buyers, where there are more than one seller. If each of the payment, if the consideration being paid is less than 50 lakhs, though the overall consideration for the property is more than 50 lakhs, but payment to a particular person is less than 50 lakhs, whether 194 IA should be applicable. Or alternatively, where two buyers are there, payment made to one seller, if both the if individual buyers payment is less than 50 lakhs, let us say the consideration is 75 lakhs, each of the buyer is paying 37.5 lakhs each, whether they have to deduct tax at source. Both of this has been tested in the appellate level, and it has been stated that if the consideration per se does not exceed 50 lakhs, then no need to deduct tax at source. However, we encounter a practical difficulty when it comes to the sub-registrar not agreeing to this particular precedents that we have. For him, for the sub-registrar, if the consideration is in excess of 50 lakhs, irrespective of the number of buyers or irrespective of the number of sellers, the tax deduction at source has to be made, without which the registration is not, though it is not his domain, but for the sake of ease, for the sake of getting the work done, we end up getting the tax deduction at source done. However, if we are tested in the court of law with regard to non-deduction, then we are on safe ground to say if the consideration is less than 50 lakhs per seller, if the consideration is less than 50 lakhs per buyer that I am giving, then I don't have to deduct tax under section 194 IA. Whether tax needs to be deducted for each of the installments that I have to make? Yes, for each of the installments that I have to make, because it is either payment or credit, whichever is earlier. Consequently, we will have to do this. What is the consideration on which I need to deduct tax at source? Earlier, it was only the sale value, but it was amended to bring in all these items to say the electricity, water facility fee, maintenance fee, membership fee, car parking fee, any of these payments made consequent to or in the course of acquisition of the property. And this is also becoming part of the consideration, and consequently we need to deduct tax at source even on this particular value. What happens if there is a delayed payment to the bidder and he ends up collecting interest? I already spoke to you about a case law which said the interest that is paid consequent to delayed acquires or gets the character of the main payment. Consequently, this also acquires the similar nature of all other payments that I am making, because interest is also incidental to the transfer of the immovable property consequent to my delayed payment. So even on interest, I need to deduct tax at source. One thing that I would leave for thought here, does every transaction of immovable property should be exigible to 194A even where consideration is not there? What is it? For example, gift of land, conversion of asset into stock in trade, contribution of asset to a partnership firm. Will it all come under 194 IA? I gave you three illustrations now. One is gift of property. Number two is conversion of capital asset into stock in trade. Third was contribution of asset by a immovable property by a partner to the partnership firm. Friends, when it comes to 194 IA, consideration is a must. When it comes to gift, there is no consideration other than love and affection. When it comes to conversion of stock in trade, conversion of capital asset to stock in trade, I can't give consideration to myself. Consequently, there is no consideration. In those two transactions, there is no trigger of 194 IA. However, where a property has been contributed to a partnership firm is a different assessee as far as the Income Tax Act is concerned. It has a different PAN. It is assessed separately. It is required to, it is considered as a separate assessee. It is required to file its return of income separately. Apart from income tax law, partnership and partner may be one and the same. But when it comes to Income Tax Act, partner is different from that of the partnership. There is a transfer. Yes, there is a transfer. When a partner contributes his immovable property to the partnership firm. Is there a consideration? Yes, there is a consideration. Consideration as much as what is credited to the specific partner's capital account. That is the consideration. But consequently, all the triggers of 194A, that there should be a transfer and transfer should be for a consideration, is something that is part of this contribution of immovable property to a partnership firm. So in my opinion, where a property has been contributed to a partnership firm, 194 IA should trigger. There is another thing that I wanted to discuss with regard to JDs, but I don't think we will take that up because it's not anyhow exigible under 194 IA. 194 IB is the next provision. I will rush you through, where payment is made by a tenant in excess of 50,000 who does not have business or whatever. His payment is more than 50,000. He is not deducting tax at source under 194I. For him, he will have to deduct tax at source under 194 IB. This is something that is applicable to everyone, similar to that of 192. For 192, 195 and 194 IB, I don't have to have a business. I don't have to have turnover. Any person is exigible to deduction of tax at source under 192, 195 when the payment is made to a non-resident which has income in it, which is chargeable to tax in India, and 194 IB where the payment made is in excess of 50,000 per month or part of the month. Deduction has to be made. When is the deduction required to be made? Only in the month of March or such earlier period where the tenancy completes, termination of the rental agreement happens. That is the month in which the tax needs to be deducted. What is the tax that needs to be deducted? 5% of the aggregate of the rent in excess of 50,000 rupees. However, when the tax deduction is happening in the month of March, because all the other payments I would have already made, and what I intend to make payment towards my tenancy in the month of March is what I have in my control, that will be the maximum amount I can withhold as taxes. 206AA, 206AB comes into play. Here also, tax deduction account number is not necessary. I can make the remittance through my PAN. Two illustrations I will speak to you, just for you to appreciate the provision easily. In the initial 9 months, rent was 47,500. With a 10% hike, rent increased to 52,250. For the remaining 3 months, what is the quantum of TDS? Here, I need to consider the rent for only the remaining 3 months, 52,250 into 3. On that, the TDS that I have to consider, which comes to 7,838. What is the rent I have to pay for the month of March? I have to pay 52,250. I compare 7,838 with 52,250, whichever is lesser. 7,838 is lesser. So my TDS is 7,838. One point that you have to notice, only the months in which the rent is in excess of 50,000 has to be considered. The second illustration is same 9 months. Next 3 months, the rent was 52,250. However, the tenant vacated on 2nd of March. Here what happens? What are the months in which the rent was in excess of 50,000? Only in 2 months. That is January and February. March 2nd, I vacated from the premises. Consequently, what is the amount that I need to pay for the month of March? I need to pay only 3,371. That is 52,250 divided by 31 into 2 or 30 into 2. Now, what is the rent deduction I have to make? 52,250 into 2 months into 5%. That comes to 5,225, which I have to compare with the rent I have to pay. What is the rent I need to pay? 3,371. 5,225 or 3,371, whichever is less is what I need to consider. 3,371 being less, I will deduct tax source. That is 3,371 only here. This is 194 IB for you. 194 IC, I think we'll rush through this. This is only in respect of joint development agreements or certain other agreements, specified agreements where the contract is not in the form of just in the form of money. It can be money as well as a product that has been given in the form of construction apartment, generally a joint development agreement. Here, where a non-refundable deposit has been given by the builder to the landowner, the builder is required to deduct tax at the rate of 10% at the time of credit or payment, whichever is earlier. And any amount that is paid, there is no threshold limit. Any amount that is paid, they need to deduct tax at source. What is the rate? 10%, 206A and 206AB will be applicable. PAN number is required only where a non-refundable deposit is given. However, there are cases where amount has been paid, which is in the form of refundable deposit. But however, in the course of the contract, it will take the characteristic of a non-refundable deposit. Only on the date on which it is no longer refundable is when the provision of 194 IC will apply, and that is the date on which I deduct tax source as well. Only on the date on which the non-refundable deposit, refundable deposit takes the characteristic of non-refundable deposit is when I need to deduct tax source under 194 IC. However, this section only limits itself to section 45(5)(a). specified agreement as is referred to in 45(5)(a). This says only for capital assets. However, I would want you to deduct 10% for all the non-refundable deposits that have been given in the course of a joint development agreement. However, where such deduction has not happened and the person who is giving that property on joint development is holding it as a stock in trade, in my opinion, 194 IC should not apply. However, that is only for cases where the transaction has already happened and I have not deducted tax at source. However, in all other cases, it is only proper that we deduct tax at source and 194 IC. This is with regard to 194 IC friends. This is something here you can always go through it, whatever I spoke to you about 45(5). Now next is 194J. One major issue here in 194J is what I will cover and go to that. That is more important. Otherwise 194J, lot of transactions we have already gone through, lot of case studies we would have already gone through. One tricky thing because of the 2020 amendment where they brought down the rate to 2% is where it triggers the whole of the challenge. That is what we will consider for our discussion today. So there is one small template that I have created to see what comes under 194J 2%, what comes under 194J 10%. So I'll just explain that to you. Possibly that should take care of 194J for you. What is it? Any payment made to towards professional or technical services in excess of 30,000 at the time of payment or credit, whichever is earlier, deducted 2% if it is to a business engaged only in business of call center, 2% if it is a technical service or consideration in the form of royalty for sale or distribution of cinematographic film, or 10% in respect of any other payment. So consequently, any other royalty also will come under 10%. Only if it is sale and distribution or exhibition of cinematographic films, it will be 2%. Any other payment for royalty, it will be 10%. This rate also I have summarized here for your ease of understanding. Now the problem here is completely with regard to what are the transactions that come under fees for professional service, what are the transactions that come under fees for technical service. What is it that I have to categorize under professional service? What is it that I have to categorize under technical service? You will say that is the easiest thing because both FPS and FTS have been defined in the Income Tax Act. Consequently, we go by the definition. Any service that comes in FPS will go to FPS. Anything that comes under FTS, I will go with 2%. So what is professional services? It is something that is rendered by a person in the course of carrying on legal, medical, engineering, and lot of other professional services also have been added in the form of all film industry. Any service that is rendered under film industry like story writers, screenplay writer, dress designers, authorized representatives, all those people come under professional services and they are also part of 44AA. The names that come under 44AA, whosoever is carrying on that kind of profession is somebody who comes under professional services. Consequently, 10%. What is FTS? FTS means consideration given for rendering any managerial or technical or consultancy services, but it shall not include consideration for any construction, assembly, mining or like project or by the recipient or consideration given in the form of salary. Now these are the two definitions, so it should be simple for us to segregate it. However, the problem comes in respect of these items: engineering, information technology, and technical consultancy. In FPS, these are the words used when an engineer provides a professional services, whether it is technical service or professional service. Whether somebody provides services under information technology, whether it is professional service or under technical service. Technical consultancy is a direct word that has been used under professional service. So whether it should go under FPS or it should go under FPS. Here, one small trigger without taking you through the whole of the research that we have made with regard to arriving at what should be the consideration. I will tell you, friends, it has to be this thing. Offering of services versus, not the offering of services versus offering of facility. It is more of rendering of consultancy services and execution of this consultancy services. If it is anything that is even in respect of engineering, information technology, if it is more of consulting that I give, then it goes under professional services. If it is something that is for execution of the consultancy that has been given, then it goes under technical services. Broadly, this is what I can tell. However, it again comes with a word of caution because this is so thin a line between what is fees for technical service and professional services, because once you do a deduction under 2%, income tax department will be waiting for us to be, for them, for levying penalty on me for non-deduction at a higher rate. And we also have a trigger in the form of a Kerala High Court decision. All along, 40AIA used to be read in the form of 40AIA. What does 40AIA do? When tax has not been deducted under Chapter 17B, or having deducted has not been remitted, then on such amount, expenses to the extent of 30% will not be allowed, will be disallowed. There, Chapter 17B was the trigger. Even if I have deducted under a different section, but if I have deducted under some section of Chapter 17B, I need not worry about 40AIA. That has been how the case laws precedents have been also. But however, there is this Kerala High Court decision. I will have to Kerala High Court decision in okay, this Kerala High Court decision, I think I will recollect, I will put it in the chat box. Kerala High Court, what it did was, it gave a decision, it said, even if the deduction is under a wrong head, even if the deduction is under a wrong head, 40AIA will get triggered. So consequently, even under 194J, if I have gone under a different provision and done a TDS at lesser rate, possibility of 40AIA. So we have to be careful about what is the provision that we intend to look at here. Broadly to say, if it is more of consultancy in respect of any of this, it goes under professional services. Execution of this consultancy will go under fees for technical services. Where the offering is a service versus offering of a facility. This is also a trigger which can help us in differentiating what is 194J, what goes under 194C. What is offering of a facility and what is the difference between offering of a service? Offering of a service is where I go approach a person seeking a service. Offering of a facility is more kind of available to everybody around. And it is not specific to a particular person. So when it is by a person and to a specific person, then it is offering of service. Whereas if it is a facility, like for example, our BSNL, MTNL, it is a facility that is available for everyone. The Bolt that we have in stock exchange, Bombay Stock Exchange, it is available for all the stock brokers. It is providing a service, but it is available to all the stock brokers. Consequently, it is more of offering of a facility, not offering of a service. Only when it is offering of a service, it gets triggered under 194J. Payment to hospitals other than recipient of service. This is from the point of view of a TPA. When a TPA makes a payment to the hospital, he has not obtained any service from the hospital, but still he is also exigible to 194J, though he is not a recipient of service. Maintenance contract, we already spoke of it in 194C, where it is more of technical in nature than 194J. If it is non-technical in nature, then it is 194C. Payment by advertising agency to actors, payment to an advertising agency, 194C. Payment by an advertising agency to actors for advertisement, 194J, because they come under 44AA and is for professional service. Consequently, TDS has to be made under 194J there. Sir, I have two more provisions. I think another 5 to 10 minutes. Hope it is fine with you.
Yes,
194 LA payment of, because the sections that Kotha sir is handling is something that I wanted to give more time for him to deal with it. Consequently, I'm doing this. So 194 IA, LA is payment of compensation for acquisition of certain. This is compulsory acquisition. Amaravati is the best example. I think people will be very conversant with that. So compulsory acquisition of property for creation of a capital there. So consequently, what happens to compensation that has been paid to them? If the compensation is under RFCT LAAR Act, that is the fair right to fair compensation and transparency in land acquisition, rehabilitation, and resettlement act, then it is not exigible to tax at all. So no need to deduct tax source at all. If any other acquisition is there, compulsory acquisition is there, then 194 LA will trigger. One of the points that we need to look at in 194 LA, the compensation that is being paid should be in excess of 250,000 per year. My compensation can be 3 lakhs. But if I end up paying in 2 years, 1 year 2 lakhs and another year 1 lakh, then also 194 LA will not apply. 2,50,000 is for a financial year. In a financial year, if I'm making a payment in excess of 2,50,000 for having compulsorily acquired, then I need to deduct tax at source under 194 LA. This also covers urban agriculture land, which is compulsorily acquired. For that also, this provision will. Barter transaction, then I will leave it to your this thing. We spoke about the barter transaction. When it comes to 195, Supreme Court has clearly held that even in case of payments in kind, TDS has to be applied. I'm not sure of how to conclude on barter transaction, but I will leave it to your thought. This is one thing, friends, date of promise versus actual transfer. Barter transaction is where I acquire land compulsorily, but against that I don't make a payment. I say I will give you land elsewhere. I will give you a residential site elsewhere. I will give you a commercial property built or otherwise elsewhere. That is a barter transaction. And how does 194 LA work around that particular transaction? Date of promise versus actual transfer. Today is when I promise, whereas the development of that land and when they give it to me is at a later date. Considering that on-kind transactions also should be chargeable to tax, what is the rate on which TDS has to be made? Is it today's date? Because the property that they have to give it to me is not yet formed. That land is not already prepared. It's not ready. It is not present. How do we even do the TDS? Will I have to wait till the year in which the land is ready for it to be transferred to the person who has given up his land? Is it the fair market value as on that date that needs to be taken into account for 194 LA? These are issues that we don't have answers for. But these are issues that will surely help us whenever we are kind of providing a solution to our clients. 194M, friends, all the TDS provisions were all along except for 192 and 195 were applicable for only assessors who were predominantly in business who were claiming expenditure. That is why all these 40A, all these triggers were coming into say. They were telling us, if you don't remit tax at source, deduct and remit tax at source, I am going to penalize you by not allowing the expenditure. But somehow the government felt there were a lot of other payments which were happening around on which tax deduction at source were not triggered. 194C, 194H, 194I itself said that where it is towards a personal payment, no need to deduct tax at source. Now, to cover all these payers into the tax net, to bring them all under the chapter 17B, section 194M has been introduced to say, where any individual or HUF makes a payment, to a resident, and the payment is in excess of 50,000 at either the time of credit or payment, this we will discuss a little later, has to deduct a tax at source of 5%. 206AA, 206AB will continue to trigger. However, the recipient can apply under under section 197 by filing form 13. And this is not applicable to individuals or HUF whose turnover is in excess of 1 crore for business and gross receipt of 50 lakhs for profession, because they get covered under various other provisions. They would have done TDS under those other provisions. So 194M is something that will not be exigible. All along this was not there. This is a newly introduced provision. Okay, so what are the issues that we can come across with regard to 194M? Applicability to non-residents. Now non-residents will have sites here. They will come here, construct properties for themselves. They will come here, perform the weddings of their children in India. And consequently, considering the big fat weddings that happen all across the country, and we have seen a recent one in Andhra Pradesh also, the cost 50 lakhs is something that is not at all considered a big amount. 50 lakhs is easily spent on a wedding, on possibly a particular aspect only. And when it comes to construction also, it's all possible. And bathroom cost can go up to 4 crores, it seems. One single bathroom cost can go up to 4 crores. So it is only left to our imagination to say what a bedroom or what a kitchen can cost. So consequently, 50 lakhs seems to be a very small amount that the government has considered for living or for making such transaction exigible to tax reduction at source. So applicability of this section to non-residents, whether non-residents when they come to India, construct a property through a contractor, they come to India and do various acts which are exigible under 194C, H or J, which comes under any of those three sections, will they have to deduct tax at source under 194M? Does the provisions of law, Indian law, have extraterritorial jurisdiction? Do they have? Can they go beyond India and say, though you are a resident of US, since you came to India, you made a payment of more than 50 lakhs to my contractor, you have to deduct tax at source? Friends, there should not have been extraterritorial jurisdiction. It should not have been made applicable to non-residents. However, when a similar issue arose under section 194J, few professionals and other trade bodies approached the government to seek clarity, to ask them, lot of non-residents make payment to us, advocates, chartered accountants, for the various services we provide to them. And the non-residents find it difficult to comply with the various tedious provisions of collection, obtaining a PAN number, collection, remittance, and issue of forms. Consequently, provide them relief. Or give us clarity whether the 194J is applicable to them at all. So the Income Tax Department has issued, the CBDT has issued a notification, circular to say, okay, in respect of non-residents who are making payment to advocates and so people, non-resident making payment to residents here, they don't have to deduct tax at source. So as to say, the department or the ministry feels Indian law can be applied on non-residents also, except where it has been expressly excluded. So 194J, they have expressly excluded non-residents to say, you don't have to deduct tax at source. However, quarterly you file a return with us. Non-residents have to file return in India to say, these are the payees against which we have made a payment, and against this we have not done TDS. Consequently, in my opinion, 194M should be applicable to non-residents also who make this payment of more than 50 lakhs to any of the provisions, like any of the payments that get covered under either 194C, H or J. Payment towards agriculture activity is exempt from tax. However, there is no exclusion of agriculture activity from 194M. Even when a farmer whose income is exempt from tax, if he makes a payment of more than 50 lakhs to a contractor, a work which comes under 194C, or he makes a commission in excess of 50 lakhs under one, which otherwise would have come under 194H, or he takes consultancy from somebody which otherwise would have come under 194J, he has to deduct tax at source under 194M. And mind you all, 194J is limited only to professional services. If I, as an individual, not carrying on any business, if I obtain any technical service, even if I make a payment of more than 1 crore, 194M will not trigger. It is only if I obtain professional services, 194M will trigger, and payment should be in excess of 50 lakhs. The limit of 50 lakhs is not for each expenditure, but it is cumulative. A small illustration I have given, possibly that will help us understand it. Is accrual basis of accounting applicable for an individual chief who is not even carrying on business? They say either on payment or credit, whichever is earlier. Where is accrual basis at all? Where do I credit? I don't maintain books of accounts. Where is this credit at all coming in? However, mostly they would have just, it might have been a Fox pass. They would have only considered cash basis. But nevertheless, they've also included accrual in the sense credit, a scheme of credit or cash basis, whichever is earlier. But generally, this will trigger only on payment only, because individuals and HUF who are not carrying on business, they don't have a mechanism of accounting. They don't maintain books of accounts. Where will the credit go and sit? There won't be a possible way at all where a credit will go and sit there. So this is one thing that I wanted to give you as an example for you to understand the provision. An architect, he identifies, helps in purchase of a residential site for which he is paid 12 lakhs, which ideally would come under 194H for a businessman. The same person goes to the same architect. He tells him, you have procured the property for me. Why don't you design a home also for me? For which the architect fee is 24 lakhs. The architects today, they also execute the project. Turnkey projects are something that are a fact today. So the person approaches the architect to say, I don't know anybody here. Why don't you construct the property also for me? So that is a total construction contract of 2 crore 40 lakhs. Now, payment which would have otherwise come under 194H is only 12 lakhs. Payment to an architect fee which otherwise would have come under 194J is only 24 lakhs, which is less than 50 lakhs. But cumulatively for all the three things, if in a year I pay more than 50 lakhs, then I need to do TDS on all the three sums put together. Then the payment is to a single person. So as to say, there is no threshold limit of separate threshold that I get for all the three sections. One threshold of 50 lakhs. Once it processes 50 lakhs, from the first rupee, I need to deduct tax at source. That is what I wanted to submit up for you with respect to 194. Friends, thanks for the opportunity and thanks for the patient listening. Any queries that are there, possibly we'll take it up in the end, or if there are any here, you can always put it in the chat box. In the next 1.5 hours when Kotha sir is addressing, I will see how best I can address your queries also. Thank you very much, Anandpur, Kadapa, and the branches to have provided me with this opportunity. Thank you so much, Kotha sir. Thank you, SVJ Ratnapura sir. So
Thank you,
I think,
sir.
my presentation, sir.
Thank you, sir, Mr. Ritesh, sir. Sir, Srinivas, sir.